Sometimes the loudest message a woman sends is the one wrapped in silence, and it's easy to assume that silence means she has walked away emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. But in reality, silence is often the space where a woman begins to observe more deeply. When she stops speaking, she starts watching. She listens to what your actions say when your words cannot defend you. She studies how you move when you think she is no longer paying attention. She pays attention to the parts of you that reveal themselves only in the absence of her presence. A woman's silence is rarely emptiness, it is evaluation. When she steps back, she is not only giving herself room to breathe, she is giving you the opportunity to reveal the truth of who you are. Because distance doesn't just create clarity for her, it exposes the subtleties of your character. She watches the decisions you make after the connection shifts. She watches how you handle disappointment, whether you turn inward to grow or outward to blame. She watches if your life collapses without her or if it expands in ways she never expected. Her silence becomes a lens through which she observes your authentic self. There is something deeply psychological about this kind of silent observation. Women often learn that emotional vulnerability can be costly, so instead of confronting everything directly, they retreat into a quieter, more internal space. From there, they can process without fear of judgment or pressure. They can examine the relationship without reacting impulsively. And most importantly, they can watch you without you performing for them. It is in that moment, when you don't know she is looking, that you reveal the most. And she notices more than you think. She notices how you communicate with others, how you carry yourself, how you handle setbacks. She notices whether you respect her boundaries or try to force your way back into her attention. She notices whether you seek temporary distractions or pursue meaningful improvement. Her silence gives her time to see what your behavior says about your emotional intelligence and your sense of self-worth. This is why her silence can feel confusing. Because you hear nothing, you assume nothing is happening. But silence is activity. Silence is movement. Silence is a form of emotional research. She is gathering data, not to criticize you, but to understand the true nature of the connection and the true nature of you. A woman who goes silent is not detached, she is reflective. She is not ignoring you, she is interpreting you. She is not indifferent, she is cautious. And that caution tells you she still cares enough to observe. But there is another layer to this. A woman's silence is also self-protection. It is her way of reclaiming her emotional space. It is her way of healing without interference. She steps back because she needs to understand her own feelings before she tries to understand yours. She needs to ensure that she isn't acting out of insecurity, nostalgia, or emotional fatigue. Her silence allows her to approach the situation with clarity rather than chaos. And this is why silence isn't rejection, it's reflection. It's her way of saying, let me see who you are before I decide who we are. When a woman is silent, she is watching to see if your consistency aligns with your promises. She is watching to see if your presence matches your intentions. She is watching to see if the man she believed you could be is the man you actually choose to be. So instead of fearing her silence, understand it. Instead of trying to force answers, become someone worth watching. Because her silence is not meant to punish you, it is meant to reveal you. And what she sees in that quiet space will determine the story that unfolds next. In the end, her silence is a mirror. It reflects your growth, your discipline, your character, and your intention. Make sure that what she observes in the quiet is something you can be proud of. Because silence has a way of showing the truth that words often hide. There's a quiet truth many people overlook. When a woman steps back and goes silent, she doesn't stop seeing you. She simply chooses to observe from a distance where your actions can't be influenced by her presence, and this distance becomes her lens. It allows her to measure the kind of growth that can't be performed or rehearsed. She watches how you evolve when you believe no one is watching, because that is when your character speaks the loudest. A woman pays attention to the man you become after the connection shifts. She notices the changes you make, not out of desperation, but out of discipline. She watches how you carry yourself when you're no longer trying to impress her. She studies whether you use the silence as space to grow or as a reason to spiral. Women are intuitive, and they can sense when a man is expanding and when he's shrinking. And in her silence, she is watching to see which one you choose. This is why distance is so revealing. When a woman is no longer actively influencing your life, you have only your own internal compass to guide you. And she wants to know if that compass points toward purpose or if it collapses under pressure. She observes whether you become more grounded or more reactive. She notices if you take responsibility for your emotions or if you let them control your decisions. Growth is not about perfection, it's about direction. And she pays attention to the direction you move in when her voice is no longer guiding you. In those quiet moments, she's also watching your consistency. Consistency becomes a form of communication that doesn't require words. The way you show up for yourself tells her everything about how you would show up for a relationship. She notices if you start building your life with intention, if you're pursuing your goals, strengthening your habits, and becoming emotionally stable. She watches to see whether you are investing in your future or clinging to the past. A man who grows in silence communicates a confidence that cannot be faked. A man who stagnates communicates a message too, and she hears it just as clearly. Women often observe the way a man treats himself before they consider how he would treat them. If she sees that you're becoming more patient, more disciplined, more self-aware, she recognizes that your evolution isn't about her, it's about you. And that is powerful. Because when a man grows for himself, that growth doesn't fade. It deepens, it stabilizes, and it becomes part of who he is. She watches for this kind of authenticity, the kind that remains even when no one is clapping. And while her silence may feel like distance, it's actually attention. It's her way of giving you enough space to show who you truly are. She isn't watching to judge you, she's watching to understand you. She wants to see if you're emotionally grounded enough to handle life on your own. She wants to see if your choices reflect strength or insecurity. She wants to see if you lead yourself well, because a man who leads himself with integrity can lead a relationship with honor. This silent observation isn't a test you pass or fail, it's a revelation. It reveals your readiness, your stability, your emotional maturity. And when she senses that growth, it creates a shift. It changes how she sees you. It softens her fear, it opens her curiosity, and it reshapes her perspective of who you are becoming. So when you feel her silence, don't assume it means you've lost her attention. Often, that silence is precisely when she's paying the closest attention. It's when she's quietly asking herself, is he growing in ways that match the man I once believed he could be? Your evolution becomes your answer. Let your growth speak louder than your fear. Because in the quiet, she's listening, not to your words, but to your becoming. There's a moment that happens in silence, a moment many men never realize is unfolding. When a woman steps back and says nothing, she begins to compare the man she once imagined you could be with the man you are becoming now. It's a private, internal conversation she has with herself, and it's not rooted in fantasy, it's rooted in potential. Women don't just fall for who a man is, they fall for who he could be. They see layers in him that he may not have discovered yet. And when the connection shifts, her silence becomes the space where she evaluates whether those layers are finally coming to light. She remembers the glimpses of strength she saw in you. She remembers the moments where you showed emotional depth, empathy, ambition, or resilience. She remembers the qualities that made her believe in you at one point. And in the quiet, she's asking herself, is that man emerging? Or was it all just a momentary spark with no lasting flame? Silence creates the distance needed to answer that question honestly. When she is no longer influencing your behavior, she can watch your evolution more clearly. She wants to see if you grow into the promises you once hinted at, whether you become more confident, more disciplined, more self-assured. She pays attention to whether your words finally align with your actions, because potential isn't just something she imagined, it's something she saw in you. And she wants to know whether you see it in yourself now. Women are deeply intuitive when it comes to emotional alignment. They feel when a man is rising into purpose, and they feel when he is drifting away from it. In her silence, she's not waiting for you to perform. She's watching to see if life pressure and distance bring the best out of you, or expose the cracks you never addressed. And sometimes those cracks aren't a bad thing. Sometimes they are the places where truth leaks through. She just wants to know if you're willing to repair, rebuild, and recenter yourself. This period of observation isn't about perfection. She's not expecting you to return as a flawless version of yourself. What she's looking for is intention. She wants to see effort, not excuses. She wants to see growth, not grand gestures. She wants to see the kind of strength that comes from humility, not ego. Because a man who grows quietly is a man who becomes solid, and a solid man creates emotional safety, not emotional storms. There's also a deeper emotional psychology at play here. A woman often withdraws into silence because she needs to protect her heart while she reassesses the connection. She can't afford to be exposed while she evaluates who you are becoming. So she watches from a place where she feels grounded, where her emotions don't overwhelm her perspective. And in that space, she gains clarity. She sees who you are without the noise, without the urgency, without the performance. She may not reach out, but she is noticing everything: the change in your posture, the shift in your mindset, the way you speak about your goals, the way you handle disappointment or rejection. These things tell her whether the man she believed you could be is finally stepping forward. They tell her whether the potential she once loved was intuition or illusion. And if she sees that growth, steady, real, unforced, it awakens something in her. It softens her skepticism. It stirs her curiosity. It reminds her why she believed in you before. And sometimes that alone is enough to shift her silence into attention. So let your evolution be the message she hears in the quiet. You don't have to chase, beg, or prove anything. Just grow. Grow in a way that honors the man you were meant to be, not the version someone expected you to be. Because when you rise into your own potential, you become undeniable, not just to her, but to yourself. In the end, her silence isn't a closing door. It's a window. And what she sees through that window depends entirely on who you choose to become. There's a certain kind of silence that isn't about distance, it's about discovery. When a woman steps back, when her voice grows quiet and her presence softens, she isn't simply moving on. She is watching. She is observing how you live, how you move, how you choose to respond to the shift between you. And one of the things she watches most closely is whether you replace her or rise above the situation entirely. Because the truth is, silence is a doorway into truth. It shows her who you are when no one is clapping, when no one is reassuring you, when no one is nudging you toward your better self. And in that space, she begins to see two possible versions of you: the man who seeks quick distractions to fill emotional gaps, or the man who transforms silence into elevation. Women pay attention to how a man handles loss, disappointment, or emotional separation. If your first instinct is to run into the arms of someone new, to numb yourself with temporary attention, or to perform your hurt publicly, she sees that, and it speaks volumes. It tells her you weren't really connected to her. You were connected to the idea of validation. It tells her your emotions weren't rooted in depth but in dependency. And while that may sting, it also brings her clarity. But if she sees something different, if she sees you using the silence to grow, to strengthen yourself, to rebuild your center, she notices that too. She notices the man who doesn't seek replacements because he's too focused on becoming the best version of himself. She notices the man who doesn't crumble when he loses access to her energy because he's grounded in his own. She notices the man who refuses to let heartbreak become self-destruction because he understands that pain can sharpen purpose. It's not the absence of a new woman that captures her attention, it's the presence of a new mindset. A woman who is silent watches whether you return to old habits or elevate into new patterns. She watches whether you engage in emotional chaos or emotional clarity. She watches whether you allow heartbreak to define you or refine you. And the man who rises above the situation quietly, steadily, without theatrics, is the man who stands out in her memory far more powerfully than the man who rushes to prove he's moved on. She also pays attention to whether you respect her boundaries. If she has chosen silence, she wants to see if you honor that silence. A man who respects space communicates emotional maturity. A man who tries to force attention communicates emotional instability. She watches to see which one you embody. Because respecting silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to honor both your healing and hers. And in all of this, she is waiting to see who you become. Not because she expects you to win her back, but because she wants to understand what you do with your pain. Women are drawn to strength, but not the loud, performative kind. They're drawn to the quiet strength that shows up when a man chooses discipline instead of distraction, reflection instead of reaction, evolution instead of escape. Your response to her silence tells her everything about your emotional leadership. It shows her whether you are a man who grows under pressure, who learns from discomfort, who rises because he refuses to sink. And that kind of man is unforgettable, not just to her, but to anyone who crosses his path. So understand this: she's not watching to see if you chase someone else. She's watching to see if you become someone else. Someone stronger, wiser, more grounded, more intentional. That is what turns silence into power. In the end, how you handle her absence becomes the story she remembers most. Let that story be one of growth, not desperation. Because the man who rises is always more powerful than the man who replaces.